It's 6:01. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And this is for our August 5th work session. Mr. Gaskins, if you would do roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman,
Here.
Dr. Anderson,
Here.
Dr. Gant,
Here.
Ms. Hull,
Here.
Dr. Maddox.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a quorum. We'll move forward with item 2, and that is to amend and or adopt the agenda. The floor is open. Mr. Davis?
Yes, I would like to amend the agenda under other items, other business, for 2 discussion and vote items for next week.
Okay. And so to clarify, Mr. Davis, you would like to add and other items with 2 areas?
2 other items.
2 other items. And can you specify what those 2 items are for
Okay.
us?
The first one is to discuss and vote on our participation in the first Clark County School Board community event to be held sometime in September.
Okay. And would discussing it be okay? I'm just thinking through. Would discussing it be okay? Because next week, if it's
Right.
on there. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. And then what was the second one?
And the second is to discuss and vote on our participation in the 5th Joint School Board County Commission retreat to be held on Monday, August 23rd, I'm sorry.
Okay. So the motion is to amend the agenda to add additional or other items. The 2 items were just mentioned: discussion of participation in a community event, and then discussion and participation of the joint school board and ACC meeting. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
And I do want to clarify, this is coming out of the Government Community Relations Committee.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion by Mr. Davis, a second by Ms. Gallagher. Are there any questions or thoughts? Sure.
Get it. Thank you. So on the community event, you said it's the 5th annual one. So is this something that should just be calendared for us? Or do we have to vote on it each time?
It is a specially called meeting, and I think in terms of making sure that the board can discuss it as a body and just not as a committee. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to have that discussion with the entire board and to gain the support of the board.
But is this a standing meeting that we have or have had traditionally? And so again, is it an agenda item that we just need to talk about what we're going to talk about, or are you saying that we don't have to have the meeting? Or I'm not sure what the.
No, I think what the backdrop to this is we had one that we sponsored in January, and we barely had a quorum there. Only we had 5 out of 9 members there, and the commission had 8 out of 9 there. So I felt like it was that by not really raising it to the level of a board item, that perhaps there wasn't as much buy-in by the entire board as maybe would have been better. So that's why I'm putting it as an agenda item and to get the board's support as a body to.
I don't think I'm asking my question correctly.
Okay.
So is this the traditional intergovernmental meeting that the board has participated in traditionally, 5, 10 years, or however many years that's happened, or is this something different?
No, this is what we started. This is our fifth one, and,
Okay.
and it's in January and it's in August.
Okay.
And in January, we sponsor it, and in August, the county sponsors it.
Okay, so I'm good. I think I understand. Maybe.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right, so there's a motion on the floor to amend the agenda. A second, we've addressed questions. All in favor of approving the amended motion, if you would show by raising your hands and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? The same sign. Okay, and any I'm sorry, was that Ms. Davis? Was that
This isn't
opposed?
opposed.
Opposed. Okay, thank you. And any abstaining? Okay. So that motion carries, and that will be before our adjournment. Those two items. Okay. So now the floor is open to amend again or adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Davis made a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there a second? Okay. Dr. Anderson made a second. Any questions? Yes, Ms.
Question.
Davis.
The items that are going to be added, will they be a part of item before the consent agenda?
I actually placed them at right before adjournment, but not the consent agenda. So like,
So
as
they're not
a-
an item 12, they're not a consent agenda item, they
Right.
are other.
yes, other items. So that would almost mean, well, it would mean that 13 would be other items and 14 would be adjournment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda as amended, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and any abstaining? Okay, so we have our agenda, amended agenda before us. We will start with our informational items, and this is number 3, the early Head Start reports.
So the last meeting that they had did not have enough members present to to go through the full agenda so no voting items were put forth. So they took the time to discuss the community assessment that was completed recently and submitted to the Office of Early Head Start and Head Start. And the most glaring issues that they discussed from that community assessment was the disproportionately high poverty rate of children in Athens, Clark County, compared to surrounding counties and compared to the national average, and how urgent it is for that office to do its best to increase the level of enrollment into these programs. And so they're moving forward with some initiatives to increase enrollment, which kind of includes a few strategies. And I'm so new to the committee that I don't feel very comfortable talking fully about those. But one of the ones that was most glaring for me was increasing their criteria for students to be, or for kids to qualify for their programs. So they're going to be looking into those types of strategies over the next year or so as a result of this community assessment. Another, I guess, important item that was discussed was the $2 billion that has been approved from the federal government to go to early Head Start and Head Start programs in the I guess in the country. So the 2 billion is not coming to Clark County. I know, right? I would have been like, woo. But it does open up the opportunity for the offices here to apply for that funding. And so they put a call out for the offices to put grant applications together to be able to access some of those 2 billions in funds. So we're really excited to see how that's going to move forward and what level of funding that office gets. So those are the main issues that were brought up at this meeting. Hopefully I covered that. Okay, good.
Thank you for that. Any follow-up questions or thoughts about what's been shared? Dr. Yeager.
This is going to come up later. Did they talk at all about the pending building of the rooms at West Broad and how important that was to the program?
So they did talk about the importance of having those rooms available for once the grant starts to, I guess, initiate, once the grant begins that they received for the expansion. I didn't hear anything, and maybe Karen can chime in. I didn't hear anything about any plan Bs if that building's not ready in time for those expansions. But they did talk about how important that is, and that they have begun or are in the midst of a hiring frenzy to get those classrooms prepared with teachers. So that's kind of as much as I know, but perhaps Karen knows a little bit more.
In the grant, we had the initial, sorry, I'm shorter than that. In the grant, as you mentioned, we knew that there would be a time frame before the building was built or completed. And so we did initiate with home-based services to begin with, and we are hiring early Head Start home teachers who can offer home-based services for those students until which time the building is complete. So you're exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good to know.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question, but I do have a comment, and I was talking with Ms. Higginbotham about this earlier. I'm excited to see that they are paying really close attention to the fact that American Rescue Plan funds are available, but there's also that $2 billion that you talked about separate and apart from that for the early Head Start and early learning. So I think that the country is trending toward making sure that we get to our children earlier and earlier. And I'm hoping that we're being very, very creative in finding ways to reach more of our population, especially as you mentioned, the high poverty rate. There are probably parents who still are yet not in a place to take advantage of that. So the fact that you're doing home-based is still exciting to me, but I can't wait to see them get to a place where they can actually be into a room and interact. I think there's nothing like, seeing those cute little babies as they innocently go through life unpretentiously. So looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll move forward to item 3.2, and this is the Athens Community Career Academy report.
I think I saw one.
And I didn't have anything, but I just want to, yes.
I did get to go to the ribbon cutting this week. It was excellent. And
Thank
I
you for
actually got to do
attending.
the welding. So I had my first experience with virtual reality welding. And I'm actually pretty good at it, believe it or not. I hit the lines. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And this is such a huge milestone. I think that was a who's who of making things happen in the manufacturing world in Clark County that attended that event. And so it's a beautiful lab. I love the layout. I talked to two of the students that were there. They're excited about what's happening with them. The fact that there are plans for them beyond just the lab is just amazing. And it's the kind of thing that we want to see 1,000 times over in our career academy pursuits, as well as our high school pursuits. So thank you very much for that work, and thanks for the opening.
I also want to add that they actually had classes this summer, and I talked to a young man that received one of their first certificates.
Any others? Okay, we'll move forward to item 3.3, and this is our Splost monthly report. All right, questions or comments about the report that was shared? Okay. All right, we'll go to our board committee reports. Item 4.1, Policy Committee, Dr. Yeager.
Thank you. So there's 5 policies on today's agenda. One is a G policy and the rest are J policies. And the J policies in particular are Dr. Watley's result of a lot of hard work on her part over the past several months. So I will let her do the presentation of them when we get to them on the agenda. The only other thing I would add is that we're building our calendar for the coming year, looking at which policies need to be reviewed and cycled through. There's a few, but if someone has a particular policy in mind that they want us to look at, please let us know as we put our calendar together. In the same way we're letting Lisa know about the calendar, we have the same going on with the policy calendar. So I know Mr. Davis has a couple on his plate that he'd like us to look at, but there's some others I'm sure people want us to take a look at. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Government and Community Relations.
Yes, for the sake of time, I'm going to save my remarks for the discussion of 13.1 and 13.2.
Okay. All right. Item 4.3, Fiscal Responsibility. Ms. Davis.
Yes, our Fiscal Responsibility Committee was not able to meet this month. It's our standing meeting is the third Thursday of each month, so we didn't have quorum. We will meet in August and really work to refine and define the work of that committee, because we do have budget and property. It's a lot to incorporate into one single meeting, but I think it's time for us to be more purposeful, I would say, and making sure that we're spending our time wisely as well as the staff's time wisely and what we talk about and how we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right. Accountability.
So we will need to reschedule the meeting that was going to be earlier today, or the executive session that was going to be earlier today, for the 2020-2021 evaluation. And then I have sort of a timeline that we're going to meet as a committee to go over, and then send out to the full board to talk about the timeline for both finishing out this year's evaluation and then what needs to be done for next year.
Okay. And Dr. Dykman, I'm guessing that timeline, because when do you all meet? Have you set your meeting yet? Okay. All right. Okay, any questions for any of those committee chairs? Okay, we'll move forward with our board and community reports. 5.1 is the Athens Area Community Foundation.
Isn't that Dr. Maddox?
Is that for
Yeah,
some
that's
reason I
Dr.
thought Dr. Maddox had traded with someone.
No, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move forward to the Community Oversight Committee and Splost report.
I was just going to mention there was a very, very, very long conversation at the last COC meeting about West Broad. And I think some decisions are being made about moving forward on that. And I don't know whether we want to have Mr. Gilbert present those, or if you just want to read the minutes of the meeting. How would you like to proceed on that for tonight?
I'm thinking maybe, but I want the board to weigh in, maybe read the minutes, and then because if there are any questions about it, maybe answer those, but it seems like that would require maybe a fuller conversation.
I would think
Um,
so, based on what I've read in a brief update, because the responsibility committee has not had a readout on any decisions that are made. And I think I'm a member of that community group for the West Broad, and I have not been invited to a meeting to hear or learn of any decisions that have been made. So I think we're not ready to have a readout until we have some other conversation, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess
Others-
I'll just summarize briefly by saying there was a lot of concern about making sure that we fulfill the early learning commitment and promise with what our decision is and making the best decision for the kids. That was the feeling by large. There was no disagreement on that feeling from the community. So.
Thank you.
What?
Other-
Oh, I don't know.
So I don't know. I'll pass them out. I don't know. I think they're in. I just got them in the mail today. I'll send them to everybody.
Don't they usually post them in board docs?
The minutes are usually well, they're on the website.
And am I mistaken? Didn't you send over, if maybe it wasn't the oversight, but I felt like you sent a Splost. Am I confusing reports?
In the
Dr. Simmons.
past, I have sent out Gerald's minutes to you, so you have them. I just got them today, and I haven't forwarded them to you, but I will do that tonight.
Do you send them to the full board?
Certainly.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. Okay. I just remember seeing something in board docs, and maybe I missed. Well, don't count on my memory.
I have
anymore.
put them in board docs in the past, so if you want me to do that, I will.
Yeah, that'd be great. But there was an update. It was in one of the
Yes.
Friday updates. There was a paragraph about what you're talking about in terms of a decision, and I want to have a conversation about that decision and what weight does that decision carry in terms of the community's involvement in that decision and their awareness of that decision.
It was in the Excel spreadsheet for the questions for this meeting, and you asked that question and it was answered by the staff. So that's what that paragraph is that you're asking about, where they
asked
talked
for a
about the
status of
decision.
it?
Yes, you asked for a status.
And then I
they-
got that paragraph.
Yeah, that's
and I
where that
responded to
paragraph
that
was.
already.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and so I'm thinking, so Dr. Yeager, when you send those, Ms. Palmer, once they're added, although I know it'll be after our meeting, we can still go back and reference, like pull the document, right, Ms. Cass? Okay, and then maybe just send that because it may have implications as well for the fiscal responsibility committee as well, and then the larger board, and that'll depend on the next meeting and things like that.
I can forward it to you right now.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Other questions before we move, or comments before we move to Envision Athens? Okay. 5.3, Envision Athens.
So right now, Envision Athens is in some transition as they are losing the project manager and the project coordinator. There is some not renewed, but there's continual interest in Envision Athens and support from Athens Clarke County. There's kind of been a discussion of revamping everything and just doing a virtual 2.0 in light of everything that we have going on. With the 501c3 status, it's ready to go, but there could be some other alternatives on the table. So that has not been done and pursued fully yet. I think that's all. Mr. Harris, did I miss anything? Ms. Davis?
I'm out.
Well, that is it.
I'm dropping my mic.
And were there any, I don't think I didn't see any notes here, but you
I
may have
didn't do
forwarded
a
them.
report, but I will do a report.
And that's okay. Did they have any that, I'm confusing like the
We've
committees.
transitioned now, and it is
Normally don't they send their note, like
they send
They're
out
sending the
emails
notes?
and notifications of things for the community. So the last thing I got today on my personal email was a request for nominations for Good Neighbor Awards. And so if you have a neighbor, a friend, or someone that's doing something in the community and you want to recognize them, this is a great opportunity to do so. And you can actually access that application on the Envision Athens website.
And so I didn't get that. So there may still need to be a conversation
Okay.
with the transition
Sure.
of the project manager. But yes, thank you. The last thing I got was the agenda for a meeting on the 29th of July.
Okay.
So
Okay,
if you
that
would
makes sense.
speak to, I guess you already did, the application and the process
I'll
for
do
that.
it again. But I signed up from a community perspective. And so it
Got
didn't come
it.
to my board email.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All
I can still
right.
forward it.
Our Georgia School Boards Association, Mr. Davis, I'm gonna let you handle this.
Yeah, thanks to Ms. Davis, we did get,
Oh, that's right.
what?
That's right. She attended.
Right.
We haven't met since
No,
Ms. Davis
but
attended the
what she was able
assembly.
to get is there were 7 resolutions that were not supported by the Government Operations Committee earlier in the spring that were reintroduced at the business meeting of GSBA in July or June? Linda?
July.
Okay. And 2 of them passed. I'm not sure. There were 7 altogether. Do you know the 2 that were passed?
Maybe I knew in July.
Okay.
I
So-
don't remember now.
So I think one of them dealt with fully funding QBE, I think. But anyway, so there
sorry.
was, just so people know, the Government Operations Committee kind of screens suggestions from various boards about what GSBA should have as its platform. But boards do have the right to, even if they don't pass it through GOC, they have the right to bring it up on the floor, and that's what happened in July.
And really quickly, Mr. Davis, when the Government Operations Committee, when they screen those things, those ideas, when is that? Because I think in the future, we need to be sure that we have it on, our agenda, just to make a note so that we're not, at a place of not exactly knowing, where the board stands, or if they stand in a different place. The past couple of years, as we've talked, and Ms. Davis, it's been a little bit easier, I think, because there's been some changes. But when does that happen, so we know as a board to have that on our agenda in a timely manner?
Yeah, it typically takes place in the latter part of May, and there's not a whole lot of turnaround. But I will try to make an effort to be really conscientious, and as soon as that meeting ends, communicate to our representatives about what was voted on. There is not. We don't really get the list until within a few days of the meeting itself. At least that's what happened this year. At this point, I can't think about what happened 2 years ago because I can't remember. But I do know that there was very little turnaround from the time that boards, that the Georgia School Board Association, and maybe that's something we need to push for, that they need to ask for boards to submit resolutions earlier so that other boards have a chance to see what's being voted on. So I will, as chair of the Government and Community Relations Committee, I will take it upon myself to make sure that we communicate that to GSBA, and perhaps they can move things up at least a month.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
But more than that, you're an appointed member of the GSBA Government Oversight Committee, right? Okay, and so it was my understanding that in October is when you guys finalized the agenda. No? Okay. So at any rate, to me, it seems important that as a board member and a member of GSBA, that we at least devote one conversation to the platform, so that we are absolutely sure that we are in sync with where GSBA is taking their legislative agenda. this, especially now, there are too many things that are controversial that we may not come down on the same side with GSBA. And I think it's important that as a board, we know the platform and are at least familiar with what's going forward.
Well, and is there any opportunity to provide feedback as a board before they've established a platform? You
Well,
get
I
what I
think
mean?
we're-
And that way
Well,
they're,
first
I think
off,
we're
the
taking advantage
platform
of great.
is, well, the platform is, I mean, it already is. So it exists right now. And
Okay.
so typically what happens is that people will, what there were proposals put forward by, and it has to be done by different school boards, to alter a piece of the legislative agenda. I mean, it would not be, it'd be, they're not going to throw out the whole agenda and start all over again. It's like us doing that with our policy. So, so when things do come up, you know, and if you remember, Linda, we normally in the spring is when, you know, we have talked about, let's support, for instance, asking the legislature to have dream students who fall into the dreamer category to pay in-state tuition, and we passed that as a board, like at a March or April meeting, and then that became part of the GOC agenda, which in turn, once it passed there, became part of the business meeting. And I think normally it's in June. I think this time it was in July, but I think normally it's in June. It's in June. So I think what we need to do is, and I think we're all saying the same thing, is that all we do is as a GOC member, we just see all the resolutions that are being proposed, and there was not time. We did not have a meeting. Now you can always have a specially called meeting, but I don't know. I don't know where people are at in terms of having how many meetings you want to have, but we can certainly, as soon as I get that list, I will notify the president, and we can call a specially board meeting, and we can talk about each of those and how we feel about it. So would that answer people's concerns?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to be in sync on maybe 80% of everything that's on the agenda for GSBA statewide. I don't think there's going to be that much disagreement. But again, when we found something that was more important, that's when you went into action and got that on there as coming from Athens. And so we have to have a sign off on that in order for you to bring it forward to GSBA to consider. And all I'm saying is that we should probably pay attention to the overall GSBA agenda so that we are in sync with GSBA.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, because one issue that's coming up is whether or not school boards should be, should be elected or appointed, or should that be partisan or not a partisan, that whole thing. So yeah, and there are some things that could be there that we would not agree with. You're right.
Okay. Any additional questions, excuse me. Okay. We'll move forward with the board president's remarks. Be on the lookout again for retreat dates. We are now aiming for September dates, and I am going to ask you to be as flexible as possible. I know all of us are extremely busy, but if we can really carve out either a full day or a day and a half, that would really allow us to not only do our self-assessment, but we can actually also, get some updates, review where we are with areas of strategic planning and things or areas of improvement, or we may also have our community feedback by then. Mm-hmm. And so if you would, when you do receive a poll, if you would just look at your entire calendar so that we can confirm those dates. We will also confirm when we meet for this retreat. We're going to go ahead and confirm the date for our January, February retreat as well. And that way we don't have to compete with so many other different things, but we'll be able to plan enough in advance. The other thing I'll try to briefly mention, I don't think probably shouldn't be a discussion item yet, maybe around September if the board is okay, and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Maddox. But At our last retreat, we discussed eventually putting together a committee that would identify ways that we could recognize individuals who have contributed significantly to the school district, many of those African American. Um, we left that retreat saying that we would convene an ad hoc committee once we were in the space, in our new space, because I don't know if you can recall, Dr. Maddox and others before now have inquired about certain spaces being named after individuals who have contributed significantly to Clark County. I received a letter. I actually should have brought it by Ms. Burke, who was instrumental when our schools were integrated. And not only did I receive a letter, but also some of the clippings, the newspaper clippings from around that time that integration was happening. And just a really beautifully and profound letter around what was going on during that time. And it really compelled me to think through, how do we recognize individuals now? Right. And so it doesn't have to be an either or. And so I will be reaching out to the board, of course, not to make a decision by email, but I want to share the letter with you. And maybe if you all are open, and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Maddox are open, look at putting that on one of our agendas, since it is something that the board as a majority talked about being important. And so if you would be on the lookout for that, I just got to figure out, get the letter scanned and sent out and just finish going through it. It's some really helpful information. And I know before, as a board, maybe even in the fall and before then, there are so many people that are still living. Many aren't, but so many people that are, well, not so many, but there are people that are still living who contributed significantly to Clark County School District, who were a part of the history. And I do think as a board, just figuring out, how do we give them their flowers, some sort of flowers while they're here. And so it was such an honor to receive it. I think you'll enjoy reading it. And so if you could be on the lookout for that as well.
That'd be great.
I can't remember, Miss Davis and Mr. Davis, there was the email that we received. There were other names that we've talked about before. I can't recall them at the moment, but where we've had people reach out to us about people who have contributed significantly to the school board. And so, yeah, just be on the lookout for that. It was
I can't remember the specific names. I do remember this specific binder that I think I shared with you guys about before, that was presented to Dr. Lanou when he was principal, when he was our superintendent, and each board member got one. And it was from a committee of people that Miss Johnny Burke convened, actually. And they talked about the history of the desegregation of the schools, and they had done all the research, and it was, oh my gosh, I read every single word of that. And it is a fascinating story about the history of education. And it brought to light the fact that we do not have our history anywhere recorded for posterity or even for our own benefit. And so I am of this world that we really need to do something to record our history of education in Clark County, so that we can commemorate these particularly significant events, and not just the desegregation. I mean, I literally now have and I think I don't know, I've probably shown it in several places, but the first actual pay period for the establishment of public schools and public education in Clark County. And it's actually 3 of those family names are buried in the Brooklyn Cemetery, which is why, of course, that's a special interest to me as well. But 3 of the colored teachers are actually in that cemetery. And so I'm anxious to, hurry up and get some community support around doing something about that for recognition. But the other piece of it is the white families are also in Oconee Hill Cemetery. And these are the first public educators in our community, and no one knows their names. We don't even know. We can't go anywhere and see that. And so I think it's important that we launch some campaigns around recording our history of education in this county. And that's something that I would love for us to partner with Athens Clark County government on, because they are under some pressure to do some things around recognition, redress, and reparations. And so, again, there's an opportunity, I think, for us to partner with that. And I do know that a lot of the American Rescue Funds are coming down, specifically targeting this population of people that have been ignored or have been underserved. And so this may end up being a project or something that we can launch. Didn't mean to go there, but thank you for that opportunity.
And it's one thing that I've been, as a member of the West Broad committee, I've suggested is we need to get some of the oral history down, because I still have those clippings that we were given years ago, Linda, and they were unbelievable. But to have people telling the story in their actual voice while they're still alive would be fantastic. And I keep thinking if we actually had a museum of education where there were buttons that kids could push and hear somebody describe a certain in their own words their experience at this building or in that building or at that time period. There's so much that we can do, and every day that goes by, we are losing those originators of public education.
We are in agreement.
Surprise!
Thank you. And Dr. Yeager just found the email that was sent. But yes, you all are in agreement. And so I just wanted to give, what was that? Yeah, we should probably end the discussion. But so just giving you a heads up that email at some point will be coming, and then to ask you to consider, to be thinking about how can we get that committee going sooner, actually before we get in the building, because there are many ideas and many ways in which we can begin to do that work.
I'll volunteer to serve on that.
Awesome. I think you two at the retreat, if I'm not mistaken, were the ones that. So be on the lookout. Hopefully September we can have it as an official agenda item. And if you didn't receive the email or weren't here, Dr. Yeager resent it to the board for us. All right, we will move forward with the superintendent's report. This is item 7.
So we are excited. Today is the second day of school. So our teachers and leaders worked really hard to create a welcoming environment post-pandemic, or not post-pandemic, this next side of the pandemic that we're still in. All of our cabinet members, member of our central office, we visited schools yesterday and today. There's a lot of great things going on. Teaching was happening on the first day, which is an expectation, and we were glad to see that. Currently, our enrollment for the second day of school is 12,781 students. So we've had an uptick of 113 students so far. We keep track of those numbers. The most important number is the number on the 10-day count. So on the 10th day of school, we will report that number to the board because that does have an impact on our funding. But we are happy that it's headed in the positive direction. Since Monday, we've had over 560 students register. So that is a lot of new students, a lot of coming back to our district, and we're really excited about that. We've had a couple of hiccups as it relates to registration. We've received some emails, and we worked on that. Today was much, much better. We pulled additional staff. Dr. Watley has assessed that situation and made some good recommendations. So we apologize to those parents that had a challenging registration, but I think today's parents benefited from Dr. Watley's leadership in correcting that. The other thing is that we've talked to leaders. Cappy Douglas called me on the first day of school at 10 p.m. at night and said, in the words of a prolific poet, Ice Cube, today was a good day. So we are just really happy that our students are back. We are just as concerned about the Delta variant, and we are in the background continuing to make plans if we do need to pivot from our in-person instructional model. We want and need to prioritize in-person instruction because we do believe that that is the best model for our students, but we are aware that if we do need to provide virtual options or pivot to a distance option, those things are being planned now. So when that happens, it is a seamless process for our students, for our teachers, and for our families. And that is our report.
I should have asked this before, but maybe you can just update us. Are there going to be more vaccine events going on?
Great question. There we go. Meeting as a cabinet on Monday to not only discuss more vaccine events, but also more testing events. So we want to make testing more accessible to our staff and our students. There are some concerns around if I'm exposed, how easily can I get a test? Of course, we have the Hillsman Health Clinic, but we want to bring testing to the school and provide really our staff with an opportunity to be tested weekly if that is their desire. But we are continuing to plan more vaccination opportunities for students and staff. And then we hope very soon when the age range is included with our elementary and our up to our 6th grade students that we can get them vaccinated as well.
Are there plans to continue with the contact tracing and safety measures that were implemented before the shutdown last time?
One of the major recommendations from our director of nursing, Amy Rourke, was to continue our contact tracing. Our contact tracers were working on their first day. People were coming back from vacation. They reported to our contact tracers. Our contact tracers advised them because we don't want any symptomatic individuals or individuals that are sick to come. So we started our contact tracing about a week ago. Resumed it about a week ago.
Okay. And has there been any pushback with the mandated mask wearing?
We've received some emails from parents, but in the school buildings, our students have been very compliant. I've only visited 4 schools. I went in some schools today, and I said, "Hey, bud, you need to pull your mask up," and they pulled it right up. We have high school students that get off the bus here for ACCA. I assessed that today. They all had their mask on. So we are receiving feedback from our principals that reminders are needed, but students are being very compliant. Even the older kids, which we thought would be an issue.
Mr. Davis?
What about the visitation policy? I know at one time we thought we could have visitors into the building if they practice, safety. What's the current status of visitors and then student teachers?
So we, and as we define visitors, I think there's kind of 3 definitions for visitors. So the first definition is parents dropping their kids off on the first day. We have not allowed that. This week, we have encouraged our schools to create an outside kind of event where they could take pictures or have a special moment with those students, but we have not allowed parents in the building in these first 2 days. We are going to allow student teachers in our building, and Dr. Blankenship and Dr. Francis could speak better to that if you have a follow-up question. And we are allowing volunteers that have an academic or a social emotional value add to our schools. So some schools use mentors, some schools have tutors that support their instructional program. Those individuals will be allowed back in our schools to work with our students. They will be required to wear masks.
I have a quick question for you, Mr. Gaskins. With the report of the 500 since Monday, and then like us trending in a better direction, and the priority on face-to-face, with our students who might have like either special needs or considerations and things like that, how are we, it's probably too early, but have we broken down like, or is there a significant increase with those students and families re-enrolling, or are we seeing more families with, because I know over this past year, and this is very subjective, I'm just going by the conversations I had. You met with a lot of parents that had concerns, and also their kids had additional needs.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious, and some of them at that point, decided they made the decision that was best for them at that time. And sometimes that was leaving the district. And so, one, is it too early? Have we pulled those numbers out yet to see if some of those students are returning or students and families with special needs are returning? And then secondly, how are we prioritizing being sure that we're getting feedback from parents, of children with special needs, to be sure, especially while we're prioritizing face to face, right? And that may not, it could be, but it may not be the best option for.
I do think that it might be too early to determine those special subgroups. We have data from 2019 that there's a difference between about 400 students that were enrolled since 2019 compared to today. So I think that would be important for us to dig into what that 400 students, what group, subgroup that represents. I would also need to do some research because we did not have a lot of students that had severe or profound disabilities leave the district, because we were able to socially distance in those classrooms. We were able to put them on an AB schedule. A lot of our severe and profound students stayed. So I would need to do a little research about what group did leave. We do have, we've heard from parents where students had health concerns. Not health concerns that were maybe severe and profound, but maybe health concerns that they had a 504 or a health concern where they had severe asthma, but they were in a general education setting. So we have heard from those parents a lot. I think we've tried to balance being kind of flexible and meeting those parents' needs, and having kind of an expectation for the instructional models that we provide. So I think we would just need to do a little more research on what groups have left, and if it is a specific subgroup, I think we can engage them to see how we can meet their needs so they will feel comfortable to come back.
Wonderful. Okay. And I know, like, as we get the FT, like the counts for FT, it may be more information. I just thought I would ask since you mentioned that.
And I would also mention sometimes in kindergarten, we've had, and I don't know how many, so I don't know if it's a big issue or not. We've had some parents last year that elected not to have their kids start kindergarten. Kindergarten is not required in Georgia. So some of those individuals kept their kindergartners home because of some of the health concerns that they had. But again, I would need to check those numbers.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't need them early or just if it's something you're going to be reporting to the board, like when we do for the FT, the counts, then if the board is okay with it, it would be.
We can definitely provide that.
I had a question. For the 2 surveys that are currently out, when will that data be available? One for ARPA and the other one for
Board of Education.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ARPA data is an ongoing kind of collection. I actually talked to Hope McGuire, who's our director of federal programs. She is going to actually have a board update, hopefully by tomorrow. This has been a busy week. So if not by tomorrow, by next Friday, we will share that board. We will share the themes that we've collected in a board update. What Ms. McGuire mentioned is that the data is missing a lot of students. And so Dr. Thomas has asked Mr. Harris to start a student advisory council or committee. So she would want to meet with those individuals. So right now we have parents, we have teachers, a lot of community members that may or may not have had students. So she wants to make sure that we continue to have that survey up, but she just wanted me to, she wanted me to be cautious that our current survey doesn't represent, I guess, all of the demographics that we would want before we make some decisions related to the survey.
Is that something y'all could push out through student emails?
Yes. Okay. So that was what we met last week, but that was one of the things that she also mentioned. And then the other survey, I can't, what was the other survey, Ms. Gallagher?
The other
Board
one, it
evaluation.
was
It-
about the district.
Mhm.
Well,
It-
about the
it-
board.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was
the
the one that,
evaluation of the board.
yeah. Ms. Palmer, is that August 10th or no? Okay. Okay.
So
So,
that one closes in 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was the 10th that it'll
Next week.
close.
so
And
as
then
soon as
we'll
it
get that.
closes, we'll,
Come
provide
up.
the raw data and then the theme so you all can take a look at it.
Yeah, and then I'm guessing I will have to probably follow up uh, with GSBA. I know they were going to do some of that lifting for us. That was, so it wouldn't fall on you all, but should be around the 10th. Dr. Yeager?
Is that going to be the accountability committee that's going to work with that data, or?
I don't know. What do you all think? I don't think we really thought about it. I mean, it definitely is a question for accountability, but also for GSBA. I do know that it is something that this is a starting point, but we definitely need to build like the capacity and the structure to be able to receive ongoing feedback according to Cognia. So it may belong in the accountability committee, but that would be a board decision. Eventually all of that data, those themes and things like that would be worked with the full board. But yeah, that would be, I think that's definitely worth discussing.
First look, first cut.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be us rather than district staff.
What was that?
Rather than district staff having to crunch that data,
Mhm,
that's our
mhm,
job, right?
Yeah.
That's a debate on that because we don't have an administrative staff to do that. And so that would be a concern for me.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that we have to decide. I will say though, it may be helpful at some point once we get that data back to just reach back out because it's our first time doing it. We know that GSBA has mentioned that they would be helping us in administering, putting together the survey. And if you know, the survey is very similar to our self-assessment, but we will need to build capacity and make it a regular part of board functioning. And so yeah, just, I would say let's get the data first, have GSBA help sort through it. But obviously it's not really sustainable to have, GSBA every twice a year or once a year go, administering that same survey and things like that. So if we have a committee that could help with that, I think it would be useful, but that would be certainly a board decision. And it may be something to put on the accountabilities committee, even just to discuss, not like a decision being made. But
I
Ms.
got one
Gallagher?
more. Okay, so with the student data that was collected last year, I don't know if y'all looked at it like really closely. What are we doing with any data that was collected that is available to make sure that we are filling in any gaps for students this year?
So we look at the data and try to address the data through what the concerns are. I think our students, through my experience, have been the most honest about either the conditions of their instruction or how things can be better, and we try to respond to that as much as possible.
So what's like if on the list of 1 million, what's the number one thing that students have said needs to be addressed this year that the district is actively addressing?
So one is around the cleanliness of the buildings. They talk about that a lot. Our buildings, if you've been in any of them, well, you haven't been in any of them this week, but our custodial staff has done a great job of being able to clean those. So that is the number one. Our high school students are very concerned about what happens during that 90-minute block, although we had not really experienced that. So we've done some training with our teachers around our instructional framework. Those are really the two biggest things. Those are not, I don't want to say they're not surprising, but those are the things that we know that students talk about the most. And that has just been a part of how we provide our professional learning.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gaskins, does that conclude the Superintendent's
Yes, ma'am.
report. There are no other questions. Okay. We will move forward with these are our policies, regulations, and exhibits to be posted for 4 weeks for public comments. And I'm going to do items 8.1 through 8.5. Dr. Yeager, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So like I mentioned, there are 5 policies tonight that we are asking to be posted for 4 weeks. The first one is a change to the professional learning. Actually, it's a change in the reimbursement to people in the district that are staff that are taking professional learning opportunities. And it's my understanding, and maybe Mr. Gaskin, do you want to handle this one, or is this Dr. Watley's? Do you remember this one? This was basically taking the Georgia DOE rule and putting it into the policy is what I remember. How we reimburse only for those activities that fulfill certain criteria. Do you remember this one? It's been a long time since we talked about this one.
Oh, yes. So Hope McGuire, our Director of Federal Programs, she ensured that this was in alignment with the law.
Yeah.
So in order for us to be able to reimburse, we needed to update the language.
Okay,
Yep.
that's what I remembered, but I just wanted to double check.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So it's pretty cut and dry. It's one of the few times I'll give you a new updated policy that's more wordy than the previous version, but it's to put it to be consistent with law. So shall I go through all 5?
Yeah,
Okay,
it will.
okay.
Yeah.
Are there
and
any
then we
questions
can-
about that? Anybody has concerns about the wording or the changes?
May I ask a question, Dr. Yeager? Because I honestly could not remember which policies I discussed last on the policy committee. So with this one, so forgive me if this was one. I don't think
This
it
was
was.
the last
It was
policy
one?
committee.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You might have been a little bit
Wow.
late to the meeting. I wouldn't want to infer.
Okay. I guess the only question that I had then with the funding for these professional development opportunities, where it says like contingent on funding and allowability stipends may be paid to all full-time certified employees and paraprofessionals. What falls, like, I guess I'm thinking, what about our other staff? So if they don't, I know when I worked with transportation, a lot of that was really being sure that they felt like they were a part of a professional staff. And while at that time, behavior specialists were very critical to professional development across the district, I know that changes throughout time. And so I guess I'm curious about, from, our nutrition workers, our transportation professionals, any other ones, because I know I'm missing many other ones. Although it's not in policy, are there opportunities for those individuals to receive professional development funding?
Yes. Well, so the stipend, when we train like school nutrition workers and bus drivers, we usually categorize that as training, and they're paid in overtime.
Okay.
So for classified individuals and paraprofessionals that are working in the summer, they are paid a stipend.
Okay.
So the stipend is not usually an hourly rate or a daily. It's a daily stipend. So, for example, when we ask teachers to write curriculum, there's a set per hour stipend that we give them. The same thing with paraprofessionals, but with like school nutrition workers, bus drivers, individuals that may work in plant services, we usually categorize that as training. And then if it is above their 40 hours, because a lot of that might be job embedded, but if it's above their 40 hours, they receive overtime.
Okay. Thank you.
So are you asking this one to go back to committee for discussion?
No, definitely not. I think I have a couple of follow-up questions, and I just couldn't
Okay.
remember if I was there.
Maybe we could ask Hope to respond to your question.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll follow up. I just didn't neglected to before now. But yeah, I'll follow up and get
Yeah.
those questions
I
answered.
think my sense is that it's very precise wording according to law, and what the stipends you just described and the professional learning opportunities, that these are very specific. It doesn't really reflect all of the professional learning that goes on in the district.
Right, right.
But maybe we could add a sentence or something to this policy that maybe mentions.
Yeah, no, and that's okay. I don't want to slow. It's not enough where I think it should be posted for 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we can continue to maybe work on that.
And I will add, we do have a chart that Dr. Blankenship and Mr. Schooneman and myself worked on that shows every stipend and how we pay every working group when they work overtime or when they receive professional learning. So it's a pretty extensive chart that we can share with you.
Could that be made an exhibit?
It could. Yeah. Yes.
That'd be great.
Mhm.
Any other questions about 8.1? Sorry. Okay, Dr. Watley, are you ready? You got your engine started? So we have 4 policies, JGGA, the walker and riders, which was discussed quite a bit and modified. Student dress code, which I'm very excited about. A super student suspension, which I'm very pleased with. And then the student suspension reg. So I'm just going to let you take the floor for now and work us through these 4.
Absolutely. And so I'm not going to verbatim read these policies. It's a lot of extensive work done. I'll just highlight some of those changes. So for policy JGGA, we made sure to clarify that all students are provided transportation. It wasn't an eligibility. It's just if you're a student in CCSD, you can get transportation. The other piece is if you reside 1 mile or more from the school to which they are assigned, we clarified that to that mile piece. Another piece was being insured for both liability and death resulting from an accident or collision. We wanted to make sure that people understood that, the liability component there. Other than that, that one was pretty straightforward. As it relates to student dress code, Andrea Jolliffe and I spent a whole lot of time. There was a lot of conversation around this one. We wanted to make sure that not only was this policy equitable, but that it was free from, in essence, body shaming. And so we did go through and change some language to make sure that students were able to freely express themselves. We do have rules as to what you should wear, and you have to follow the student code of conduct. But I don't know who remembers back in the day you had to put your arm down and measure your skirt. We kind of eliminated anything that alluded to those types of things that were subjective. And so that's done.
Yay.
Any questions?
I'm excited to put this one up for public comment. I'm sure we'll get some, but and I do hope the audience takes a look. I mean, the public take a look at it. But I do think it's greatly improved. Thank you for your hard work on that one.
You're welcome. As it relates to policy JDD, student suspension, so some of the language that we changed included the MTSS framework, understanding that we do have a myriad of interventions for students before we remove them from a school setting, with a heavy emphasis on restorative discipline. We do have our director of restorative discipline who is working, vigorously on those interventions for students who, are coming back from restricted placements, or students that where you're just on the fence. What should we do with them so that we don't always go punitive? We did write a paragraph that was beautiful. Andrea and I came up with around multi-tiered systems of support. So we have supports of interventions for students. And then as it relates to special ed and 504 students, we make sure we were really clear around those guidelines. And that's the student suspension. The reg is right there as follows.
And most of the reg edits were just removing details from the reg and putting the necessary pieces into the policy, which I think is something that the board is really asking us to do as well.
Absolutely. Do you want me to just skip BDC while I'm up here and I can go straight to JG? Okay. JGF, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I think this is just it may be just a grammatical type thing, but I know oh shoot, just went dry. Talking about GGA, in the first paragraph, we talk about mile or more, but then in the second paragraph, we talk about less than a mile and 1/2 miles. So I wonder if the 1/2 mile, the 1 and 1/2 mile should also be 1 mile.
The correct language is reside 1 mile or more from the school to which they are assigned. So
Right.
Yeah, I
And
see
then
what
the
you're
next
saying.
paragraph,
Yeah.
it says 1 and 1/2.
Yeah, so the state policy or the state funding is related to 1.5 miles, if I recall correctly. So that's old language. So if with your permission, we can just strike that 1.5 to
Yeah,
make it just
scrap.
1.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'll talk with Lisa. Can you make a note or talk to Angela? I think that's just an oversight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And if
So we've already discussed and put out for public comment those next 4, items 9. So I don't know, unless there's questions, I don't know that you need to go over them again. I think we've gone over those in May.
yes, we have. Thank you all.
Unless there's questions, I didn't run a short circuit question. So yeah, so these 5 would be going up for public comment for the next month.
Okay, and that is 8.1 through 8.5. Okay. All right, moving forward to item 9, and these are items 9.1 through 9.4.
So we have talked quite a bit about BDC, and my sense was that there is not a consensus of the board to make. Oh wait, this is the policy adoption. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I think we talked about this one already. It's just changing the public comment to 24 hours prior to the board meeting. That's the main change here. Sorry, I'm rusty. This one's been a long time since we talked about. I guess the bottom line is we have received no public comment from any of these 4 policies.
Okay.
They've been up for quite a long time, and there has been no public comment.
Okay. All right. We'll move forward. If there were no public comments, no questions, no additional board comments, we'll move forward to item 10. Thank you, Dr. Yeager. Oh, did I skip over too many? I'm sorry.
Nicole, I can't hear you. Are you?
We will be at 9.1, right?
I just did 9. 9 were the 4 policies that have been up for
Yes.
public comment, and we have received none. So we discussed them in April, I believe, and they went up
gotcha.
for
I
public
was
comment,
looking-
and now they're being ready to be adopted or revised.
I was looking at the wrong spot. You got it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can we see policy BDC? I just can't remember it, if we got it. I thought I looked at it, but it's not ringing a bell.
So this was a change in how we move policies through. And I'm rusty on it, Linda. I'm going to have to look at it a little bit more closely too.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember these.
I honestly don't even remember talking about this one, so.
Yeah, let me, I'll write you a paragraph when I get home.
I'll take another look at it and see.
Well, okay, I do remember, sorry. We removed regulations from our approval. That's the number 1 change in this one, is that last sentence of the first paragraph, we've talked about this for over a year, is that now that we've gone through the entire review of all of the policies and all the regs, et cetera, we are now going to give the regulations back to the district, and those will not be in our purview. However, we did get agreement that if there are any district changes to the regs, we will be informed in advance. And if we decide that there are pieces of that reg that we want to put into policy, we will have time to do that. So there won't ever be any sleight of hand behind the regulations, of course. They the policy committee will be made aware of any changes.
But will the policy committee continue to review the regs along with the policy?
we will review them, but we will not
change your.
we will not vote on their approval.
Excellent, thank you.
Right, thank you. And then the only other one is the public comment on our policies. We asked to get 24 hours notice so that we're not getting it at 4:59 or 5:30 right before the meeting, and I'm having to sort of figure out how do we respond to that public comment. They're giving me 24 hours.
Wait, real quick question. But our agenda won't change within 24 hours.
No,
Okay.
no, it's just that I will have had a chance to digest any public comment so that
No.
I can report to the board.
I'm asking like for the person who's writing a letter or coming to speak. If if something is added to the agenda that they want to speak to, our agenda won't change, preventing people from having a comment on something that is being added to the agenda.
So this is not public comment in general. This is public comment about the policies
Okay.
only is what's being covered
Okay.
here. The public comment policy that we've talked about has been
Okay.
tabled for a
Okay.
while till we
Yeah.
can come to
I got
some
'em mixed
agenda.
up. That's the one I'm
That's a
concerned
separate
about.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
we've set that one to the side until we have a retreat and can talk about what exactly we want to do with that policy.
Okay. But this is for policy.
This is for when you put a policy up for public comment for 30 days on the website, and people can type in or email or respond to that policy, and we get feedback on whether they like it or not. That needs to be given 24 hours before the meeting so that I can share with the district and figure out how we're going to react to it.
And it's the same method for people who want a policy to be looked at, not the board, community members.
So the policy adoption, the steps of taking public input on policy has stayed the same. We've not changed that. They can always bring things to us.
Okay.
Good questions. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward to item 10.1, our financial report. Mr. Gaskins and Schooneman.
What do you say? The financial report's the bottom one. So good evening, Mrs. Gant and fellow board members. Before we look at these financials, I just wanted to mention it's a little bit out of order because we did talk quite a bit about our current financial state when we discussed the budget amendment last month, but we didn't actually go into detail and present this set of financial statements. So what I'm going to do here is just stay really high level. And if you have any questions and want me to get into any kind of detail, just let me know. Looking at our cash and fund balance, and Lisa, you can just stay on this page. We are tracking about $7.5 million above where we were at this point in May of 2020. And what I really want you to do is focus on the fund balance, not necessarily the cash, but the fund balance, because that's what we're focusing on and tracking in more emphasis than the cash. So there is always going to be a slight deviation. This month it's a little bit more due to the interfund loan that we provided Splost to buy the Piedmont property. But that's why we want to focus primarily on that fund balance, which is very healthy and tracking above where we were at the prior year by about $7.5 million. In terms of revenue, the only bit of concern that we have is that we're looking at collecting about $1 million less than what was budgeted in our local property taxes. And in my analysis, I think Chris was a little bit aggressive in what was budgeted for our local property taxes. So this year we were a little bit more conservative in how we budgeted for those property taxes. I don't think it's a matter of collections by the tax assessor's office. I think it's more a matter of us being a little bit aggressive on what we had budgeted for FY21. I have kind of leapt ahead a little bit, and I can tell you we're looking at least $1 million short of where we are in terms of what was budgeted for property taxes. So it's in the range of probably $1 million to 1.2 at the end of the fiscal year for what we didn't collect in terms of what we had budgeted. We have more than made up for that gap, though, with our state QBE, the governor's amended budget. We have received $3.6 million more than what we had budgeted for QBE revenue. And at this point in May, we are already tracking ahead at 91.8% of total collections compared to 89.26% the year before. And I can tell you again, I've already looked ahead at least 1 month, and closing out the fiscal year, we'll be at least at 102% of what was budgeted for our revenues. So overall, it's a good story. When you look at it in totality for our revenues, over 100%, we're looking good. Expenditures, we do have quite a bit of savings there. So we've had normal savings kind of throughout the year. We had that budget amendment that we talked about last month. So not only were we looking at saving quite a bit of money, we approved the payroll calendar shift, and due to a state health benefit saving on 1 month, we were already looking at adding another $1.5 million because of reduced expenditures. Then we ended up approving that budget amendment so that we actually added another $6.5 million of savings and expenditures because we moved it out of the general fund over to CARES. So all of this is kind of increasing the fund balance at year end for our general fund. So next we get into our cash flow projection. And as of May, at the end of May, before we had approved that budget amendment, we were already expecting our fund balance to increase by about $4.5 million. So that's that last sentence there, that at the end of May, I had predicted that we're going to increase our fund balance by about $4.5 million. We added the $6.5 million with that budget amendment that we approved last month. So that's about $10 million. And I've jumped ahead again. And I can tell you that $10 million is going to be at least $11 to $11.5 million. So overall, financially, we're looking very solid entering in FY22. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question, but it's back on local property taxes. So it's one question with two parts. Okay. So when you look at when you're projecting for the future, have y'all considered, right now we have the eviction thing being lifted and the number of evictions, and then for the QBE part, the number of students that will be more transient, maybe going to other counties because of our housing situation that's coming?
We are somewhat isolated from those types of decisions. As a Board of Education, we set a millage rate. Mm-hmm. We don't do any of the collections, the actual collections in terms of receiving payment for that revenue. That all goes through the tax assessor's office. So I can't firsthand, personally tell you what kind of decisions have been made regarding.
Okay, so if there's a decrease in taxes that are collected, how does that directly impact the school system? If there's a decrease in students attending school, how does that affect QBE?
Overall, in my analysis, the cause of this shortage that we're seeing, mm-hmm. It's not an issue of collections. I don't believe it's that we are seeing less collections than we have historically.
I'm not talking about right now.
Okay.
I'm about when taxes are collected at the end of this year or next year. Thinking forward, not just in this moment right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to follow. If we see a decrease in the tax revenue,
yes,
is that what we're talking about?
Hmm.
That's what we collect, right?
Right. That comes to the district.
Right.
If there's a decrease, what do we have in place to make sure that we're not serving children because we didn't have that much money coming in?
I think that's just an annual budgeting decision that you make. We get the information from the assessor's office telling us what the overall value of all the property is. And then you as a board kind of set the millage rate and determine what kind of revenues or estimated revenues are going to be coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And based off of those revenues, then you kind of make the decisions based off your strategic plan, where you're going to spend that money that's coming in.
Okay.
So if we do see a decline in overall values of property throughout the county,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to make different decisions as a board. And I mean, if we go back now about 10 years, those decisions had to be made because there was a decrease in overall value of property in the county.
Corinne, are you asking about how the lift of the moratorium could affect enrollment and QBE
Yes,
funding?
all of that.
Okay, does that make, are you, so what she's, I think what she's asking
Go ahead, you
is,
try.
since right now there's a stay of all evictions, she's wondering if when the moratorium is lifted, families may be evicted, which may cause some students to unenroll from our school district, and will that have an impact on the QBE funding in our budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Got it.
Yes, thank you.
So
It
if we're
took a lawyer.
if we're looking at the state revenue, the QBE revenue, which is driven, directly from those FTE counts that we have in October and in March, if there is a decrease in student enrollment, then absolutely that subsequent year we would see a decrease in state funding.
So do we have any protective measures in place?
Fund balance.
Fund balance. But that's from year to year.
Correct. So I
we
would
don't
go
have
back
nothing
again
for-
to the annual budget that's prepared. You're looking at those FTE counts and you're projecting out at least a year in advance what not only your property tax revenue is going to be, but also your QBE revenue. That's because we know what those student counts are.
Mhm.
So I can go in advance and calculate to a half of a percentage point degree of accuracy what we're going to receive from the state. So then once again, we kind of just collectively have to take into account the reduced revenues at that point, and then budget accordingly.
And so I would add, so Byron comes to each cabinet member and we build our budget from zero. And so, for example, for me, textbooks is the largest part, or one of the largest parts of the budget that I create, but with a decrease in students, so would the budget for textbooks. It would also decrease. So Byron predicts, this is what our budget will be based on those enrollment counts that we know ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he will tell the superintendent, we may need to decrease our budget by this percentage as compared to the last year. And so then we have to prepare budgets that has that impact in the decrease.
And for instance, this year, we would have had to have made those difficult decisions because of the 4% decrease in enrollment, but we were able to fill that void, that gap with CARES and ARPA funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on, does anyone have any additional questions about these financials? Okay, then we can move on to the supplemental reports, just touch on those briefly. The first report that you're looking at is the professional legal services. So far, year to date, spent $225,000 of our original budget of $199,900. So we have overexpended roughly $26,000 there. But we did definitely have some unforeseen legal expenses during that fiscal year. Okay, moving on to the next page. We have our listing of invoices between $10,000 and $80,000. You guys can peruse and look through at your leisure, and let me know if you have any questions about those. And then finally is our CARES expenditure report. We have three kind of main sections there. One is the CARES. The top one is the CARES Act ESSER 2 or CARES 2. The overall budget, $21.6 million. We have expended a little bit more than $1 million left, right? Or a little bit more than $1 million as of May. Had about $380,000 encumbered. So overall out of CARES 2, we had $20.1 million left available. CARES 1, that's the one that's going to expire first, is right in the middle of the page. Total budget of $5.79 million. We have spent year to date as of May 3.9 and had encumbered $150,000. So we had about $1.7 million left to spend in CARES 1, and we have until not this September, but the following September to fully expend CARES 1. And the bottom third that you're looking at, the CARES ESSER SEA reserve, that's the amount that was set aside for private schools. So overall, those are the supplemental reports. Does anybody have any questions over those reports?
We don't
Yes,
have
sir.
any American Rescue Plan funds yet, right?
So we have received the award notification, and as a cabinet, we've gone in and had a rough budget. Hope McGuire has entered the budget at GDOE, but as of the end of May, that budget was not approved yet, and so we didn't import that into Munis in order to show up on these reports.
Excellent.
So yes, we got those funds. It's just not part of our Munis budget yet.
And I think this is Mr. Gaskin's question, and not for right now, but later. I see that. Are we in the second or third year of our relationship with the University of Virginia?
We finished our third year with the University of Virginia. We are in our extension year, and the extension year is only to provide continued professional learning for one school, which is Alps Elementary, and then district staff that support that school. So the initial contract and relationship has ended. It was a 3-year. That part has ended. Alps elected to continue for one additional year. So we will be in our last year with the University of Virginia.
Okay. Do we have, and again, this is what I don't expect you to answer now, but some type of analysis in terms of, was that an effective partnership? Is it something that we should continue, renew, expand? Was it a wash? But at some point, it would be very interesting for the board to hear the outcome of y'all's assessment of that relationship.
I agree with that. I think we would need more time to provide that. I think one of the two big goals is to retain the leadership at those schools, which we have been able to do at all of those schools that had a relationship with the University of Virginia. The second part was student achievement data. Because of the pandemic, we have data. All of our students did not participate in the assessments at the end of the year. So there's an asterisk next to that data. But I think we can provide the board with an analysis of how that went.
There were some success criteria when we went into contract with them. And so I think, yes, because of the pandemic, that might be skewed. But yeah, I thank you for that good question, because I know that there were specific measurements for a contract.
And we've had some great success with the schools that were involved in that relationship. We announced, I think we announced at our leadership retreat, and we'll be presenting to the board on the 19th, the success that J.J. Harris just received. They were a Title I reward school because they had the top 5% growth in the state based on their achievement. So that's just one success story. There are other success stories and the four other schools that participated. So we will be able to provide you with that information.
So is there talk about coming back to the board to work with continue to work with the University of Virginia, or is it just too early to make that assessment?
So my team is participating in the extension year. So I, along with Dr. Thomas, made a decision that we want to train district staff so we can provide some more sustainability to those schools. So professional learning for us to continue to support those schools. And I think after we go through this sustaining year, I think then we'll be able to make a recommendation to add other schools. I will say Fowler Drive was a school that we wanted to add in the partnership. At the time, they did not have a permanent principal. So we were a little hesitant to add that school. And then there was also a desire to add, I think, Cedar Shoals High School at the time when I first started. And there was some transition along with that principal. So I think there's an opportunity to add more schools. I would just ask that my team be able to go through this sustaining year to see, if it would benefit us to continue with the relationship with us, or will we have the capacity to kind of leave that work on our own?
Awesome.
I'm so encouraged by that. Thank you.
Does that conclude your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Schooneman? Okay. All right, thank you.
One last thing, Mr. Schuman. Now, I'm keeping a mental tally here, so it sounds like we have like 15 million added to fund balance. Is that right?
I think right now I can comfortably say about 11 to 11 and a half. It could be more. That's just what I'm projecting so far, but keep in mind the books are not closed yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schooneman. We'll move forward with item 11, and these are our personnel recommendations. 11.1 is a board report, and then 11.2, we also have some additional job descriptions. Mr. Gaskins, is there any additional information you want to add about these items?
No, ma'am, it would be our recommendation to have these approved at our board meeting on the 19th.
Okay. And are there any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the community school resource liaison and whether or not they would be working specifically with the family engagement specialist, or is that someone else out of Mr. Harris's department?
So that's in Mr. Harris's department, and he just stepped out.
Okay.
So we can definitely answer that question before we leave today.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry. Are we going to have a discussion on the community schools thing or no? Is that
Well, Mr. Davis asked a question, and I think Mr. Gaskins mentioned that they'll answer it before the night is over. It falls sort of under Mr.
so I sent in some questions on that. I didn't see an answer unless somebody posted it someplace. I can't hear you.
Can you turn your mic on,
can't
Dr.
hear you.
Anderson?
There was a response to that in the Excel spreadsheet, but it might have been after you looked. And it's a pretty lengthy response.
I'll need to
Here it
really
comes.
spend some time with that because honestly, I didn't get that in time to evaluate. So I don't do really good with same day responses and night before. I've already been through a lot on that. But okay, I have concerns about that.
All right. Well, I would encourage you with those. Well, yeah. So
He's
there was a
back.
question for you, but with those, if there are additional questions, I guess to continue to reach back out with those concerns. If you still have concerns about what you've read.
Mr. Harris is here.
Yeah.
Sorry. Can you repeat your question, Mr. Davis?
Yes, I just wanted to ask the community school resource liaison, is that the person that would be working directly with the family engagement specialist?
Yes, in the schools, at the school
Okay.
sites.
And I did not, what I didn't see, I saw that this position would work with a team at each school. But would at the same time and I know that you are in the process of upgrading the family engagement specialist, so that every school has a designated person that's their job duty. Would this person kind of like meet with them like a it wouldn't be a department head, but kind of like a chair of this group that could meet and exchange experiences in terms of what's happening and what they're doing at different schools to engage parents in the education of their students?
So that's part of the position. I don't want to call them a chair because I don't want to elevate them.
Right.
as leaders,
I understand.
But yeah, they would essentially work directly with our local school governance teams as we're working on developing our school-based community school resource committees, which will be made up of those principals, parents, community members, students, and community organizations. So yeah, they'll be responsible for liaisoning with that family engagement specialist ensuring that community groups have access to facility space. So they'll be the ones organizing the arrangement of that facility space after school hours in collaboration with the principal. That we're reworking our after school program. So they're also the ones kind of in charge of working with our ASP manager. So as we look at revamping and inviting community groups in to offer more after school programs, they're the ones who are really working with, and the idea is to kind of split them right now. So instead of having a community school resource liaison at all 21 schools, we kind of need to start building a solid foundation with just a couple of our schools, start getting them into the practice of what does that look like? What are some of the processes for organizations to work with schools, to rent space, to offer programming such as adult ESOL classes, GED programs? Like, what does that look like in the school? And so we have Soraya, who's our community school director. And then these individuals would be that person that would liaison with family engagement specialists who, as you said, we are working to get to that full-time status, who are kind of the outward. So you think of our community resource liaisons as the people who work outward in, and then our family engagement are those who are directly communicating with families, planning parent universities, planning school-based family events, such as that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you answered more than my question. In fact, I think I'm confused now.
Oh,
is
sorry.
Is the community schools, are they outward or inward? Maybe that's my question.
Ask me more. Say a little more of that.
Okay, is you talk you I think you've got one person that's more outward focused.
Community school.
That's the community schools person. This community school resource liaison is more in the school.
No, that's the person.
Oh, that is the person.
That is the person.
So that's the community. Okay. So they're more outward focused.
There's only one community school resource.
Okay.
Anything. Yeah, liaison.
Okay. I'm trying to understand their relationship to specifically to the family engagement specialists.
So our family engagement specialists are the ones who are in charge of, yes.
Okay, but who are they part of? You know, like I know we're getting a director of social work, so that not a director. I'm sorry, lead social worker, and so I understand the lead.
You're asking the organizational structure.
Would this person be the lead family engagement specialist, or that's a poor phrasing?
I mean, you could kind of, but their role is so much more expanded than a family engagement.
Right.
They'll work directly with them. We also won't have one in every school, so I don't want to say they're the lead because it's not like these individuals.
Oh, we're having a number of these. Is not just one person.
It's two individuals.
Okay.
And so it's not, we don't have one per school, so it's not like they're leading.
Okay.
I don't want to think of it as like a supervisory position.
Okay.
They don't supervise FES. The FES report directly to the principal. Okay. So these individuals work directly with the schools, connecting them on the outside. So part of what their work is going to be initially is that data collection. So part of that is working with each individual LSGT, each school with data collection that we don't have. So, we have student achievement data, but when we start drilling down to what's other data that we see outside the walls of the school, such as, access to healthcare, eligibility with government programs, access to, youth programs, they'll have to do a comprehensive needs assessment for all 21 schools. And then each school has to have almost their own individual community school strategy. So I just don't want to say they're a lead family engagement specialist.
Okay. So there are two positions and they report directly to you.
Soraya.
I got it.
That's in addition to the one that we approved to investigate community schools as a direction for the district.
Yes, so Soraya is directing that work, yes.
And so we don't yet know what that response for that work is, or what the recommendation is going to be as a result of that work, but we're going to hire 2 more people to
assist with the collection of that work. So we have 21 schools. And so Soraya being the director, she's already started. She's met with the state. She's met with the national office. Their recommendation actually was 1 coordinator per school, but they did say you can start small with, just a minimal amount of coordinators to kind of get the data collection. But we have 21 schools. I mean, we have 21 different data collection processes that need to happen. So Soraya is leading that work, and then she'll be developing the plan. So that's the plan the board will see, which is what's ALP's community school strategy, what's Barnett Shoals community school strategy. So that's the work you all will see, is each school will have an individual plan because every school is made different. The student population is different. Their needs may be different. So these 2 individuals are going to support and assist her in that data collection and then aligning the resources for each neighborhood. So what's needed at ALPS may look a little bit different than Clark Middle, even though they're right up the street from each other, but the age group is different. So they would make sure that those resources are aligned at that school. And so that'll be the plan so you essentially be approving 21 comprehensive plans into 1 district strategy.
So I haven't read your response in the Excel spreadsheet. I apologize for that. But now with this information, you're saying that they've met with who?
I missed the end of that
Sarai
sentence.
has already met with.
Oh, there's a department. So at the state GADOE, they have a Department of Whole Child or Department of Community Schools. So as this strategy has been growing nationally, many states have started to invest in offices that oversee this strategy because it's proven, it's research-based, it works, it impacts student achievement, the whole child, the social emotional learning. So the state now has an office. Her name is Ashley Harris, no relation. And she is the director of that office at the state. So Sarai's been meeting with her, the other directors, the other school districts across the state that are doing community schools have directors, and they meet with her, I think, every 2 weeks. And they're basically guiding all of our school districts into the implementation of community schools. And every district is doing it differently, based off the amount of schools, your resources. For us, we're looking at American Rescue Plan dollars because that was kind of President Biden's recommendation was to look at, your American Rescue Plan and CARES funding for community schools. Some districts are not doing coordinators in every school. For us, we felt like Sarai is new. We also want to build a solid foundation. We don't want to jump in with coordinators just everywhere. Let's build a process first, a solid foundation. And then, if the need grows and we see that, we may potentially need more positions, that may be a time we have to approach the board and say, we may have to expand this more. And as it works, right? As it works and it grows and more community organizations become a part of it. So all districts are different. It's a good thing though. Every district is made based off your community. Oh, and then the national office, I realized you were writing it, National Coalition for Community Schools, and his name is Abe Fernando, and it's with the Children's Aid Network, or the National Children's Aid Network.
So I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but kind of along the same lines as what Linda was talking about. When we approved the community schools director position, I did also feel like we were told that it was going to be a person who was going to sort of assess the needs and figure out how we were going to do community schools here. And then I think that what Linda is saying is that we haven't gotten that information yet, right? So the sort of gathering of the information and establishing how our district is going to do community schools. So for me, it feels hard to approve positions for something that I don't really understand the whole framework of it. I mean, I've gotten more information just now from what you have said, but when I was first looking at the job description, I have both of them pulled up here, the liaison and the community schools director, and there's a lot of overlap. So it felt like we've approved a position to do all of these things already, and we just hired somebody to do them. And now we're hiring 2 more people to do those same things.
I do wonder maybe what we could do if Dr. Thomas and the board would like, we could have a work session where we do a presentation on community schools and maybe invite Ms. Harris from the state to do a brief overview of just like how the model works and because the strategy itself, in full transparency, it'll be probably another couple months before we collect all that data. We're already starting with our surveys now. We have the youth development survey out. We'll be working with each school as part of that, getting the family engagement specialist full time, because you can't ask a counselor who's stipend as a family engagement specialist to go out, collect data as he or she's trying to work with students by day. So we could, again, I don't want, obviously the board's gonna make a decision that's best for our district. If we wanna hold off, the timeliness of it was we just wanted to make sure we had everything in place so that way when it's time to hit go, Sarai has the support to actually implement the strategy or to get the data to collect it. So we could hold off, and then if it's the will of the board and Dr. Thomas, we could do a presentation in September or in the coming months on community schools and just talk to you all about the strategy. I will say what you'll see again from that presentation is it looks very different in every county. And so it's just kind of piecing it together based off of our district and our community. First thing we had to do was look at our district's comprehensive needs assessment. So the state evaluated that and then said, this is kind of the model that would work for you all, because we have some of the pieces already in place. We have LSGT, some districts don't have that. So they have to develop school governance teams. We kind of have that already in place. But we could do that if that makes the board more comfortable before approving something as this.
I'm not comfortable putting it off. I think this is a pretty important piece and it fits into your time puzzle. I mean, having the director sit there by herself and not have the support she needs doesn't make any sense either. So that's just my 2 cents.
And I also think when you talk about communities in schools, but we're actually talking about 21 communities in schools.
Yeah.
So it's community and school. And so that is a lot of ground to cover for one person.
But I'm also, you're saying communities in school. That's a whole different organization than community schools. That's a whole different thing. And so again, we have a lot of people in Athens Clarke County community that are, again, community facing, right? And so I'm wondering, are we leveraging any of those resources? We have 30 navigators that are doing exactly what you're talking about in terms of community facing. Are we leveraging any of that? And essentially, do we have any type of imperative that says community schools is a model that works for Athens Clarke County, given our demographics, given our poverty rate, given our mix of our students, given our majority minority schools in a flipped community setting? Does it work for us? And does it bring enough to the table for us to invest 3 salaries and taking a look at it?
Mm-hmm. So I will say I love that end of that question, Ms. Davis, because we are the perfect community for community schools because of exactly what you said. We have local community organizations who are passionate, caring, wanting to get into our buildings, wanting to work with our kids, already working with our kids outside of school. We have local school governance teams, which can act as a community school-based team infrastructure. We have an after-school program at all of our elementary schools and middle schools. There does need to be some alignment there, and that's the work our department's doing now. So we have the pieces of it, but where the community school coordinators or liaisons come in is to strategize and bring that together. So they kind of exist in their own areas. I'll also say, you also know we have a lot of nonprofits in town. And so one thing that Sarai and I always talk about is we get emails every day. I mean, every day from community groups want to work with schools. We love them. We appreciate them. But how do we align their work to each school? And so it's, we kind of are think of us as the shield. So they come to us, we meet, we talk about their work, we talk about what's the impact, who do you work with, which school are you interested in? And so that work, of course, does take time to make sure we're actually offering valuable programs to our students. And I think that's where these liaisons also come in, is because they can connect those same organizations you're referencing to the schools in a much faster pace. So at this point, we're kind of scheduling people out in September, kind of late October, early October, to say, we'll get to you when we can. So I think Soraya being one person and having these 2 liaisons to kind of say, yeah, we know for sure this program will be great at Stroud. Stroud's been looking to add, ESOL class or adult ed class. This will be a great connection. It's capacity building. So it adds capacity to the department. I think, Dr. Yeager, to the timeliness, there is some timeliness there, but at the end of the day, I don't think, we're creative. We've been working with the neighborhood leaders, with communities in schools. I think some of those conversations have also led to, we do need some capacity internally, because we are district staff. They need folks who can connect to the schools, who can be that person who has a direct line to that principal and says, hey, we vetted this program. It's great. It offers this value. So I think there are ways around it. It just does make it a little bit, it makes it messier than I think following the actual model, which is having a person who is the go-to. Someone could pick up the phone and call this person and say, I want to work with this school.
And so if I can interject to just talk about process for a second, because I think we're talking maybe about 2 things at once. So the first thing that we're talking about is just approving the job description as it is written. And if you all are comfortable or uncomfortable with the job description, it might need revision. That's the first part of just approving the job description. I think the second part, which is the board's responsibility, is approving the hire of these individuals. So to Dr. Yeager's point, I think if we don't approve or decide to approve or not approve the job description, that kind of delays hiring someone. So I think we could approve the job description, or we could remove it from, we could separate it from the other 2 job descriptions. That would be a strategy. But we could also approve the job description, but hold off on hiring the individuals until the board feels more comfortable with that process through a presentation. But I think once we decide we are comfortable or we're not comfortable having to approve the job description, post the job, it just kind of delays the process. So it would be my recommendation that we just focus on, does this job description make sense? Do we want revisions to the job description? And then have a separate conversation about our readiness to post the job, so the board could either approve for those individuals for hire or not approve it.
I suggest we leave the job description as is and on the agenda for vote next week.
Yep.
I'd like to pull that and make it separate.
Okay. And
Okay.
oh, go ahead, Dr. Anderson.
I've been trying to say this for a little bit. So at the GSBA meeting that Karina and I attended, there was a presenter who talked about this specifically and how it impacted their school district. And it was a really riveting presentation that she gave about the many moving pieces that are required to implement such a
Strategy. Yep.
strategy.
Mhm.
And what I came out of that presentation is that the reason why so many personnel are needed for this is because if you're going to do it right, you need to partner not only with nonprofits, but with people who have money. And to do that, because you want to try to implement some of these things like they did clinics, full functioning clinics with mental and behavioral health, as well as physical health, and implemented them in every single one of their schools in that district as a part of this initiative. And it's very expensive to do that. And so the way that they cut down on those costs was by having residents, visiting physicians, private industry contribute to this endeavor, but people had to make those partnerships happen. And bodies had to do that. So the personnel was necessary to make all of those missing pieces, all of those moving pieces come together for that district to implement such a giant endeavor in every single school in that district. And I feel as though that's what we need to hear, right? So not just a presentation on what it looks like in theory, but who's doing it here in the state that even mirrors Clark County School District in some way, and how successful it is. And then I feel like this conversation might be able to quiet down a little bit, and we can look at the personnel and all of that and feel more confident knowing that adding administrators to the payroll is going to have a positive impact. Because I think part of the pushback is that the community looks at us and says, why do we have so many people hired for the school district who aren't teaching, right? And so we're trying to balance that, right? And have a conversation with the community in return. But we need to see those examples, I think, a little bit more concretely.
Do that.
I think I would support that. And I also know that we have to be intentional about the work we do. And you're absolutely right. And what you shared, creating partnerships, you add that to a social worker's or a counselor's job. I mean, it's a lot of work to build infrastructure and to be sure that the right organizations are in places. And we do have a lot of nonprofits, and we have a lot of organizations that really are doing good work where that partnership needs to be made like yesterday. And so just from having worked in schools, it's absolutely not something exclusively that a principal, especially a teacher, or a support professional can do. I think, yeah, more information. Whatever the board would like, we can vote on this separately. I am in support, as Dr. Yeager and at least one other person has mentioned, in going ahead and voting on the position. Now, if we separate that'll be up to the board. But I hesitate to delay it. One, because it does impact the hiring process, but two, it borders operations, right? So at some point, the positions that we approve, either we're going to approve them or not. If we don't approve them, then they're not going to be added. And and so more information, more helpful information, I think would be wonderful. I do think I would support us going ahead and taking some type of action on the positions listed.
Okay, I got one thing. It's not a question, more of a encouragement. So when you do your presentation, if you could show how we're already doing community schools, like I think an example for me would be how Clark County School District this summer, just because my son played travel basketball, opened up its school buildings and allowed different organizations that had the travel ball or youth basketball to use the facilities, which is I think a positive model or example of the community schools model.
Absolutely.
So just more of how we're already doing it and why it's necessary for somebody to like bring it all together.
Can do that. Thank you.
Other thoughts and conversation? So if we want to, am I hearing from the board, we need to pull this, one of these positions and vote on them separately? Is that the general?
Not for me.
That's not the general
I have a
consensus.
general question.
Okay.
How often do job descriptions come before the board? Like when are they supposed to come before the board?
When are they supposed to?
Yeah.
I'm not
Like
sure.
before they're filled or?
Yes.
Generally, yeah, but before,
Okay.
I think
I
in
think
terms
before
of
they're filled.
job description, if it's a new job, then we approve it before they post it.
Okay.
Right.
That's typically the expectation. Dr. Blankenship, do you have additional information to share?
No, that's correct. Whenever there's a new job description created, then that's going to come to the board to be approved. That doesn't necessarily mean that that position is going to be filled at that time, because you always have the opportunity to say, we'll approve the description, but we want to hold off on filling that position. And of course, you have the option to not approve anyone who would be brought to you to fill a position.
And I think we started doing job descriptions to avoid, or approving job descriptions to avoid getting to the point of having somebody that they wanted to hire and then us saying, why do we have this position? Because then they've already gone through the hiring process, and that's a bad time to say, I don't want that position, right?
Yeah, in most boards, either the board approves the job description or the board's designee, which is the superintendent. So either the superintendent approves job descriptions or the board does.
Have we ever had a Braille list before? I'm really excited about that position.
So my understanding is this position was created because we have a student with that need, or students with that need. It is, I'm not familiar with the historical position here in Clark County, but I know in other districts that position has come up, and I believe we have had students with that need, whether we have contracted that out or we have had it in-house. Mr. Gaskins might know that better.
Yes, we've contracted it out in the past. We have a number of students that need that support. So that's why we have added the permanent position.
I think that's awesome, and I think that's a big step in the direction of being equitable for our students, to have someone in-house be able to make sure that their needs are met in a way that's not too differentiated. So I just want to say I was really excited to read that one.
All right, so we'll move forward with these 3 job descriptions on here.
With my objection.
Do we want to pull it? I'm okay with, as I mentioned,
It's not
pulling
a
it up.
consent agenda item, so, I'm obviously outvoted here on that, but yeah, I
Yes.
definitely wanted to do community schools separately.
Mr. Pruitt, in this case, what do we do, because it's a part of the same item? It's okay. All right. Is the board okay with that?
Let's take the attorney's advice, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll listen to our.
No, I wasn't asking if they were okay with the attorney's advice. Are they okay with separating it? Okay. Okay. All right. We'll move forward to our consent agenda, and it is 8:03. Okay, and so we can do it. We still have 2 items to discuss, but let's try to move through these efficiently. Item 12.1, do we want to remove this from consent? All right. 12.2, and this is our work session minutes.
Consent.
Consent.
All right. 12.3, call meeting minutes.
Consent.
12.4, board meeting minutes.
Consent.
12.5, June 24th, call meeting minutes.
Consent.
12.6, July 15th, board meeting minutes.
Consent.
12.7, just approval of the Title IX coordinator.
Consent.
And the equal opportunity coordinator. Thank you, Ms. Palmer.
And just to clarify, we do this every year, right? And this is just a person that already works in the district that gets designated as this person, right?
That's correct. So
Okay.
for 12.7, 12.8, 12.9, it is a existing staff member that we appoint to lead that work.
Okay, so 12.7, did we say consent?
Yes.
All right, 12.8.
Pull.
All right, pull in 12.8. And Ms. Hull, if you could be sure to follow up with any questions that you have, or do you have any right now that can be addressed?
I think they may have to do some research.
Okay, all right. And so if you don't mind, if it's going to require an extensive amount of research, and maybe you'll be able
It's
to.
not.
Okay.
I have some questions about disproportionality and historically what has been done and what will be changed and why we're doing things the same way a little bit.
Okay, and so if you would like reach out to Dr. Thomas and copy the board on that, just to be sure that there's general consensus that the board is okay, and that the board is interested in the data.
I was just gonna ask if you could you can blind CC me on them responses. I'd be interested in hearing the responses.
And I have similar concerns about 12.7 of how the district in the past year has been handling Title IX concerns and
Okay.
EO concerns. If there's any data
So should we pull it?
from consent, that's what I'm asking is until I didn't realize this one was on there.
No, that's okay. So we can pull 12.7 and I think 12.8. And then if there's, Ms. Hull would get her questions to Dr. Thomas, and then Dr. Yeager, if you would provide your questions as well to Dr. Thomas. And that way, we just have an idea of what those questions are, Dr. Thomas and the board. Is this time sensitive, Mr. Gaskins?
It is time sensitive. And then I had a question for Mike, because
Okay.
we are approving the person, not the policy.
Right.
That I'm just trying to make a clarification.
Yeah. So
Is that the understanding of the board that we're approving the person?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if this will make a difference, but for 12.8, it looks like we're actually approving 2 people. And my question is
That
not.
was 12.7. That's approving 2 people. This is 12.8.
So when I go down, it talks about having Sam Preston and Utavia
I'm sorry.
Tolbert as being the designee. Does you?
You want to come up? Yeah. Okay.
Currently, our hearing officer is Sam Preston. The way we've restructured this year is that Sam Preston, as the hearing officer, will report to the Director of Restorative Discipline. And so now the goal is that Ms. Utavia Tauber is going to go through hearing officer training as well. So she will be the backup hearing officer just in case something happens. Because right now, the only person we have to do hearings is Sam Preston. So that's just to clarify. She's going through training next week.
Okay.
So then it's just to have an additional person to support
that work. But
that
then
work.
also we're looking at how can we infuse the restorative practice work into the hearings and how we do hearings here too as well. So all of that. And my goal is to present that to you guys in about maybe 2 months. Did I put September? Or maybe October. I don't know. I know. Soon. How that restorative practice work is going to be more than just infused in schools, but also infused in how we do our hearings. Okay, so it's going to be like a little bit of a shift. I think it's.
I welcome
work.
the shift.
You welcome? Okay, welcome.
Yes. Okay, so we are pulling 12-7, 12-8. Okay, what about 12-9?
Consent.
All right. 12-10, which is our
Consent.
revised intent to apply for Head Start.
Consent.
Consent, okay. Letter of sponsorship to the reapportionment office.
Consent.
I don't know what this is.
Yeah, can we explain this one?
Yes, Mr. Pruitt.
Mhm.
Oh, the voting districts. Right. These are not school districts.
That's
These
what I
are
was
voting
going to say
districts.
too. This
Yeah.
is not school redistricting. It's okay. Okay.
Weren't there some emails that went up around where you explained this in really great detail, but then we requested that perhaps a presentation at a meeting kind of detailing this or something?
I think we talked about the board wanting to be somewhat involved in the process, not just handing it over to somebody, because, you know, we have some ideas about our districts and how we might want to change the shape of them.
Right.
We didn't want to, I think you offered us an option of just kind of contracting out and having somebody tell us where the best numbers are or not, or. Yeah.
Consent.
All right. 12-12, approval of staff laptop purchase.
Consent.
Consent.
12-13, student Chromebook purchase.
Consent.
12-15, the renewal of the student information system.
You skipped 12-14.
You did skip 14.
Central Office Network.
Okay, I'm sorry. 12-14, approve the central office network equipment.
Consent.
I need to look at that.
I got a question. Is that for over here or over there? Print.
I think it's the new, yeah.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to read through all the rest of these.
You want to pull it?
Yes, that'd be good.
Okay. 12-14, we're going to pull.
Just for a separate vote.
Okay. 12-15,
Consent.
That was good
Consent.
information about
consent.
that one.
Okay. Oh, what was that, Miss Davis?
That was good information about Infinite Campus. I didn't really understand how involved it was.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then 12-16.
Pull.
Consent.
I've got a conflict of interest.
Okay, we're going to pull that because of a conflict of interest. All of the things that have been pulled, please reach out, share questions and concerns, and try to resolve any issues. And if you can't resolve issues, then they're still on the agenda for us to take action on.
So we should send those to Dr. Thomas directly?
If you would, and then just copy the board just in case there's information that we all want to know, especially if it's time intensive. Because, you know, according to our norm that we created, if, you know, the district, the superintendent and staff will prioritize the request for information really based on how much time it's taking. and also if it's something, that the entire board is interested in. So it's just good so that we won't be asking the same questions, can save the staff some time.
Dr. Gann, I think it might be helpful if we create a Google Doc of these items that were pulled. If you or the board could suggest a time that everyone could have their initial questions in, we could work as an executive team to answer those questions by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And then if there's a second round of questions, then we can do that same process. So we can have all of those questions answered and alert the board that the questions are answered.
Gotcha.
So you all can look at them prior to our board meeting.
I think that sounds good. Mr. Pruitt, does that sound legal? Sure. Okay. All right. Just double checking because,
that would be good. Yes. And then we'll add them.
And
You
if-
want to be there too?
He got bingo 3 times already.
And if you could have those questions in by, do you think Sunday or what do you, I know in a healthy world, we would not be working on the weekends and neither would you all. So I'm thinking Friday, but I want to be realistic too. Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that reminder. So what would be by Tuesday?
Tuesday next week is good.
Okay. So if you can have your questions in, so Mr. Gaskins to Dr. Thomas and Mr. Gaskins by Tuesday, and then that will give them enough time to prepare and then answer any additional questions.
Okay, so even though the 12.15, I have 2 questions, but I don't, it don't make sense to pull it. I just want clarification or something.
Oh, about the Infinite Campus?
I can just put that on the,
I'd just go ahead and pull it.
okay, yeah, let's just
Go
pull
ahead
it.
and pull
Yeah.
it. Not a big deal.
Because it's just a separate vote. And so those,
Okay.
yeah. The most
Okay.
important thing is that we don't get into the meeting and take 3 hours because we would have already had these answers. So that's the biggest thing, but it can still be separate. And then at some point, if you don't feel like you have enough information, then continue to ask questions, but at some point, we still have to take action on those items. All right. Did I miss
So
something?
12.15 is a time-sensitive item. Is it possible to leave it on consent? I get with Ms. Gallagher to answer any questions that she has, because is there another opportunity if we wanted to pull it separately at our meeting? Then we could pull it. But if I can answer your questions before then, we might just be able to leave it on consent. Is that okay?
Which one are we talking about? I'm sorry.
The renewal of Infinite Campus 1215.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. The
Okay.
first one. Yeah.
Vote will still be on the same day.
I can't remember. I'm sorry, Ms. Palmer. I really have
I have
no idea.
12.8.
12.9.
Yes.
Okay.
And so are you going to create a Google Doc with those 4 items on it?
Yes.
Okay. And then send it to us and then we'll put questions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, it's 8:17. We are at item, let's see. Oh, this would be item 13. And then so it's 13.1 and then 13.2. And 13.1 is the first community event. And this is from the Government Relations Committee.
Okay, I will go ahead and start if that's okay. I guess that's appropriate. We have, this is something that is, according to our policy, the Government Community and Relations Committee is to organize at least two board events with the community. And so we've talked at great length about, as a committee, about what that would look like. And in the conversations with Dr. Thomas, her main concern was that we don't overload staff. And so, we wanted to have our first event with minimal use of Mr. Harris's office, his staff. And so what we talked about was that, and I think my assistant is leaving the building, but okay. But anyway, what we talked about is each board member would participate, and we would sit down at a table with 7 other with stakeholders, non-employees of the school district, and each of us would have a question that we would pose, and we would note the responses to that question, to that question. I mean, each of us would have a different question. And, and I'm talking not about school operations, but we're talking about board operations. For instance, one question, just throwing it out, just to give some concept to this, is what are some effective ways that the school board as a body can interact with the community? How should the community be brought into the work of the school board? And these are very kind of generic questions. They're not talking about school operations or anything, but in terms of how we as a board operate. And then maybe we might have questions about what are the expectations of individual board members. One board, not a certain individual, but just an individual board member. So that's one of the tasks that we need to do in this discussion. We wanted to, and we won't be able to resolve it tonight, but we wanted to allow the each board member to think about what question would be appropriate. Okay, so we're talking about an event where we would have, if each of us participated, we would have 9 tables. Each of us would be in a table. Each of us would have a question, and that we would be asking, and we would be taking note of people's responses. We're not there to participate, we're there to listen. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gallagher to explain the actual process, because we would rotate, and that's where the World Cafe comes in.
So in the email that I sent out, I sent a few links, YouTube videos, and a sheet that simplifies it.
When did you send that?
I sent it today.
Okay.
So over the weekend, while we're typing up questions for the district, feel free to watch those videos. They're only 2 to 3 minutes long. They're not long. But they explain what the World Cafe is, what the model looks like. At one of our meetings, it was suggested that we actually bring in a facilitator for that. I would encourage us to look into that a lot more. Someone who is well-versed in facilitating events where like thoughts and ideas can get really big, and help to make sure that we are accurately collecting the information that is shared by the people who are sharing their thoughts and ideas. Another piece, so some other pieces that I know will come up later. So childcare is strongly encouraged to be there. A meal Fidgets. I love fidgets. Fidgets. Just a lot of little like pieces that can get lost in the process that are crucial to making sure that it is an event that goes over well for the participants. But for us as a board, I think being in a space where people feel like they can freely express themselves, their thoughts and opinions without us, with us practicing very good facial muscle control. I'm working on it. But hearing it and then hearing people say, you know, like this is like this is how I think we could be better as a district, or you and your role, or however we come up with the questions. Hearing people who are stakeholders in our decision making, I think is very important, and I think a positive step towards rectifying any distrust that the community has. Just a small step towards addressing that. What you got?
Yes.
Is there was this particular model chosen over like a virtual town hall or some type of virtual moderated panel for a reason? Can you share why this model was preferable to something like that?
Sure. I think what we wanted to do is make ourselves less of a focus. Oh, excuse me. I don't know how that happened.
You are in contempt.
To make us less of a focus. You know, I mean, we've had at least one panel of school board members presenting something. We did that at Oglethorpe Elementary a number of years ago, and the audience listened and asked questions and stuff. Here, you know, what we thought that we would be gathering information and not answering. And so we wanted to pick a model where, you know, when we first started talking about it, we were kind of like bystanders, but that would put staff right out there, and that's not right to staff. And it's really, we're not hearing the information directly. And so this is what Ms. Gallagher has seen as a model. And I do think I'm sure there are other group models, but the idea is to, in the rotation system, I think that you would have a chance to sit down with 4 different groups, right? Mm-hmm. And so it would give us a chance to not be the focus. Does that kind of answer that? I mean,
Kinda. I guess I agree with the premise and everything. I think I was wondering why we were deferring to this model instead of, say, having a virtual town hall when each board member posed a question to the audience and still listen to the feedback without doing the presentation. But I guess I'm trying to think through how to get the largest number of participants, how to be very safe with the pandemic still happening. And I haven't watched the video, so I'm sure it's going to be informative, but just wondering if there was a preference for this model based on those things and some other models that could work to achieve that.
And can I also say, in our defense, we planned this out about a month and a half ago, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And it was before this Delta craziness became front and center. So September 14th, I think, is the consensus of this group that we should have this, from that doodle poll, that we should have this event. And when I saw that, I immediately thought to myself, I don't know if September 15th is realistic anymore. 14th. Because doing something like this in person at this point is probably not a great idea. So perhaps we need to revisit the date that we want to do this. And maybe if we do want to do it on the 14th, reconsider the format.
Or we could do it the same way, but we can do it virtually. If the technology, I mean, I know you can do it, because I think we've even done it in terms of board development, where we've been put in different groups. And
you cannot record in breakout rooms, and you can't have one facilitator in multiple breakout rooms. So it will change significantly how we how we collect the information, and the way that we interact with each other in the group and the facilitator.
So the breakout rooms, there's a limit to how many you can have?
There's not a limit to the number, but there's a limit. You can't record multiple rooms in one Zoom session or in one session in whatever platform that you're using. So there's no recording. So there's no way for us to go back and document multiple rooms information.
Oh, okay.
And you can't have a facilitator in multiple rooms at one time. So if we had 7 different rooms, you're going to have 7 different facilitators or note takers or.
Well, see, the board, what we talked about is that the board member would be that note taker. Was how I always conceived it. You know, that would be the job. I mean, you literally would pose the question and hush up after that and just write down as close to verbatim as you can of how people responded to the question for 15 minutes. But that doesn't address what you're saying in terms of actually recording the meeting and being able to look back on it and get the information. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if we want to remove certain elements, we can do it through a safer. We'll just have to remove certain elements that we had already discussed. Is all I'm saying.
I think like with models that actually work, tweaking them for something like Delta, I think would do like the participants a disservice. So maybe we might need to go back to the drawing board if I remember some.
How many people are you talking about?
Can you hear me?
How many people
Okay.
in this?
How many people
in this exercise?
There would have been 63 stakeholders. That would be 7 per table, plus us at each end of the table, and then I want to go ahead and flesh this out. But then I think you're right. We're probably going to go back to the drawing board. But I do think that this is something that, as soon as it's physically safe, that I think can make a lot of work. We just, we talked about maybe, asking the the what's this, school-based LSGT, each LSGT team to select one person, and that's 21. And then there could be, each board member could select 4 people from the community. It doesn't have to be from their district. And then that would almost get us to that 63 number. There are a few other folks that we may want to, to extend the invitation to, or maybe, because we felt like if we just opened the door and said, okay, first come, first serve, sign up if you want to participate, we would not get a very diverse group. So we wanted to be strategic in terms of where those, and this would not be a one-shot deal. I mean, we're obligated to do something with the community formally twice a year, but it would.
That's in our new policy?
Yes.
Which one?
Whatever our committee policy is.
So this is a part of the government relations
Yes.
committee? This is your policy? Okay.
Yes.
This is how you exercise that relationship? Okay.
I am so sorry.
I got it.
Golly. So anyway, that would be one way to kind of build the participation. And then, so that was one of the things we wanted to discuss, but I guess the COVID thing did kind of throw that out. But I still think we need to begin the process of
Spaces where you can safely distance 63 people if you choose to do that.
I would just volunteer, and you don't have to take me up on it. I won't be offended, but if it's beneficial for me to offer a crash course in facilitation, that is within my wheelhouse. I'll be more than willing to share that with the board. Or if you're looking for ideas on who could be a facilitator, working with the Department of Education, there are a group of facilitators that I can pass on to whoever to reach out to get someone in who would be neutral, but who will have those skills as well.
could they do it virtually?
Yes.
Okay, can I call you tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, 'cause that would be, I mean, if that's agreeable to the committee, I mean, that we can see what we can, because is the 14th, not everybody responded to the poll, but would the 14th work if we could do it virtually with everybody?
I still don't have a sense. Are we talking about all day in the morning?
No,
or
no, we're
afternoon?
talking
What are
5 to 7:30, 5:30 to 7:30. The times were in the poll.
I didn't get a chance to do
So it was, we had 4 Tuesdays to pick from, and so it seemed to be a consensus of the 14th. And then we will work very quickly to see, and by the time we meet on the 19th, we will have it thoroughly fleshed out with Nicole's help, and we have a facilitator chosen, and it'll be much more clear. What about in terms of the numbers of how we select the folks? That's the one thing that I would like to get some feedback on the board with. Does it make sense to ask the LSGT, and that's something where we wouldn't have to count on Lawrence to help us communicate to the LSGT, but that's all his job would be, is to inform them that if they could give a representative to participate, and they would be spread out among the virtual tables or whatever format. And then each of us is 63, is that a doable number, you think, Nicole, for this? I mean, to do it virtually?
I think it's going to depend on your format. I think 63, there could be a facilitator, but if you're looking at breaking out into breakout rooms, we're going to have to look at having a facilitator for each breakout room.
Okay, so maybe that's too big of a group.
I mean, I think it depends on your format. I think it can be done. I mean, universities are holding lectures with also breakouts with larger numbers of students. So I think it can be done effectively, but I think it's really going to depend on what your goals are, and how you format it, because you have to be very intentional to make sure you meet them. But I think it's doable. It will just require planning.
Okay.
And so it sounds like the Government Relations Committee or a representative, Mr. Davis, will work with Ms. Hall, and you all will
flesh it out.
Yeah, sort of specify everything. If I could ask that you send those details to the board, so that when we get to the meeting, we're more so asking about any clarifications. And certainly, if you send it to the board, if you have questions, clarifying questions, please reach out to Mr. Davis, Ms. Gallagher, or Dr. Anderson. Those only three?
Sure.
And that way, and Dr. Maddox, and that way, once we get into our meeting, it's more of a formality that yes, this is going to happen, or no, these are the changes and these are the updates.
And actually, I had it all figured out, but then I don't know why I didn't think about the COVID thing. So I'm sorry.
All right.
Optimistic, just.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so is that it on that community event, Mr. Davis? I know there was a second one that you all wanted to.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Mr. Harris to come up and kind of fill us in. I mean, and Ms. Davis is correct. I mean, we've done these before. I think the focus is of the new constituted Government and Community Relations Committee is, when we meet with the county commissioners, we wanted it to end in something. We did not just want a conversation for conversating purposes. And so that's something that the committee feels very strongly on. So we've tried to pick topics. And actually this time it's the county's job to do the topics, but Mr. Harris has been in contact with the mayor off and on, and there's been some problems, family issues that Mr. Mayor Gertz has had. So anyway, I let him speak and then I speak afterwards. Thank you.
You're welcome. I am going to try to keep this brief and make sure I cover. So the joint meeting between the Clark County Board of Education and the Athens Mayor and Commission is scheduled for Monday, August 23rd. We'll get the exact time to you, but it'll be that evening. As Mr. Davis said, this one is actually hosted by the county. So if you all recall, the fall one is hosted by the county. The spring one is hosted by the school system. So for our 3 topics for this joint meeting that we have proposed to Mayor Gertz and the commission is the expansion of broadband internet services. So the infrastructure that will be necessary to ensure that all Clark County residents have access to internet in their homes. Athens Clark County Eastside Library. So the discussions around where we are in that process of having a library on the east side of Athens, and then a youth development opportunity. So we will be releasing a survey tomorrow. It's a joint survey. You all will see it in your board update. We're asking that you share with your constituents. We'll be pushing it out by social media, by email. And we're basically asking as many of our residents here in Clark County to give feedback on what do they want to see from us when we think about youth development. I believe there may have been a member of the board on that conversation, which spoke to the idea that many times we tell people what they want without going and asking them what they want. And so rather than us come up with ideas of what programs we need on the east side and in Athens, we should go to our citizens and ask them what they would like to see from us. So that survey will be released tomorrow. It'll be open until August, I would want to say 17th or 18th. Then we will disaggregate that data. We will share it with the board. It'll get shared with the mayor and commission. So that way you all have that data in preparation of that joint meeting. The goal really being that as you all meet with the mayor and commission, you have an opportunity to discuss what ideas and what ways we can collaborate with the county to bring more opportunities to youth in Athens. So I believe, Mr. Davis, those were the 3 topics. Usually these meetings do last about an hour and a half. We have, like I said, we will receive additional information from the mayor. We're going to set a meeting, I think, next Wednesday. So we'll get those details out to you. Hope that was it.
I was just going to add one thing, and the reason why I wanted to kind of bring it up to the board. Oh, I'm sorry, Linda. Go ahead.
Who gets the survey?
Who gets the survey?
Yes.
Any Athens Clark County resident. So they have a portion where they can answer as a parent. They could be a student, a child, anyone who lives in Athens Clark County. We didn't want to limit it to just a certain side of town, but we will kind of disaggregate it by demographic so we could see.
You're actually circulating the survey. Okay, thank you.
And the county is also going to be pushing it out. So we're hoping for as many responses as possible.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's one thing that when we start talking about youth development and youth empowerment, that's the core of the survey, right? Yeah. One thing that just occurred to me, and again, it's just trying to look at it from a lot of different points of view. I would be interested for the county, and if we ask these questions ahead of time, we may be able to get more information. But they talk about food deserts, and I wonder if there's recreation deserts in Clark County. Do we, And so I'm just wondering if anyone's ever taken where the parks are, where the rec programs are, and overlaid where the students are, and to see if students are within biking distance of a after school program or a summer program, and if not, is it something that the schools can do? I mean, Ms. Gallagher talked about opening up the buildings for that was basketball, right? During the summer, but maybe making a special effort for leisure services to do the same thing within these recreation deserts, if they are any. I don't know, but I do think that when we start talking about involving our youth, we need to break it down into sections of the community to make sure that there are places for kids to play ball. There's some type of activity that's organized for some of the kids if that's what they so choose. And so to ask the city to look at leisure services, where the services provided, what are the parks that are open, and then what can the school district do to facilitate places where additional resources are necessary to engage our students. So those are the types of things I think that we need to, when we meet, that we're not just meeting to be meeting and not just meeting to get information, but actually, if there are recreation deserts in the community, that we can then in turn as a board, ask Dr. Thomas and her staff to work with the county, to work with leisure services to somehow overcome that. We're not making the plans to overcome that, but through finding out where the deficits are in the community, then we can better say that as a board, we feel strongly that this program should be functioning at and somehow or the other that there should be a program in this neighborhood.
And so perhaps those are things that can be either brought up at the meeting itself, or if there, things that the board or individuals have, really, sort of pressing questions, or information that they would like to pass along or request for information, they can share that with you, and you can, share that with Dr. Thomas and Mr. Harris as they prepare. I think he said he has a meeting next week. And so I do think it's important as we prepare for that meeting to understand, the one, that it's an hour and a half, and we won't be able to, ideally from that conversation, we'll walk away with additional things that we should continue talking about for our next time together. And so, but yeah, so with those types of things, just share with Mr. Harris and with Dr. Thomas. And I think that'll be the best way, the most efficient way to do that. Ms. Davis?
I would like for us to consider a focus on a legislative agenda that is shared with the county. There are a couple of places where we intersect, where we could potentially really have an impact if we actually were working together to make it happen. If I'm not mistaken, when we had these meetings in the past, the representatives were invited as well. Is that not correct? Were not our representatives invited in the past when we had the joint meeting? No, that was totally separate one? Okay, very good. All right.
We usually have that one.
But again, the support for a legislative agenda would be, I think, a critical component of a meeting with the county commissioners before we meet with the legislators.
Okay, and so perhaps that may be something that you all as a committee can put on your radar screen, especially as we prepare for that spring meeting that we will host. But I don't want to tell you how to do it, but just, maybe put it on your radar for further discussion. All right. Are there any additional comments and questions? All hearts and minds are clear. Okay, we're going to move forward to item 14, and that is
So moved.
adjournment. Okay, we have Ms. Gallagher made a motion, Ms. Hull second. I don't see any objections. We are adjourned at 8:47. Have a good evening.